Welcome to the Bold Analysis. My name is Frank. Yesterday, the government found itself in quite unfamiliar territory and based mainly on the ruling that was given by the Court of Appeal and that followed the ruling by the High Court. The ruling that declared the Finance Bill, or the Finance Act rather, because it had now passed the stage of being a bill and was now an act in action, to be illegal, therefore quashing the use of that Finance Act, quite gave a blow to the government. Why did this give a blow to the government? You know, one, the Finance Bill 2024 was rejected by the people, and therefore the president was forced to quash the bill and send it to Parliament and tell them to delete all the clauses in that bill. Therefore, the option that that House remained with, that they were passing the Appropriations Act on, was the Finance Bill of 2023 that was quashed yesterday by the court. Therefore, this has a legal implication that the government will now be forced to revert to the Finance Act of 2022. That is 2021-2022, the one that was used by Uhuru Kenyatta.
This House is law-abiding, and therefore, if the fallback position that we will have is the revenue-raising measures for 2 years ago, it therefore means we also have to adjust our expenditure to be that of 2 years ago, Honorable Speaker.
When I read that judgment this afternoon, Honorable Speaker, I was left wondering and asking myself, does it mean then that all acts of parliament passed by this House post-2010 then are also a nullity in law and unconstitutional?
You know the current law has been deleted 2024, and therefore 2020 we had gone back to 2023. Now with a further deletion by the courts of 2023, then we go back to 2022. Okay. So we have to utilize what President Uhuru left. I was in this case assisting Omutata, and in fact I am the one who researched on public participation. It is something I've been doing for many years in Parliament due to having been a member of the delegated committee, and we have to always make sure when a minister makes delegated legislation, regulations of an act of Parliament, they have to do public participation. A lot of times public participation in Kenya has been taken for granted. We had proposed one time a public participation act which never came to fruition because Parliament elapsed. So up to today we don't have a public participation law, but we have guidelines in the Constitution, and we have court rulings. That's what has been tried to explain what is sufficient public participation, what amounts of public participation. And therefore, what happened in this particular case, and I'm the one who pointed out to the High Court, when we went for this pleading, there was, you'll introduce, there were sections introduced on the floor of the House, major amendments in the Act. And every time you bring something new, then automatically you must take it back to the people so that the people can deliberate on it. And I find the Court of Appeal having done justice to the country so that we can all make law without impunity. So that the great numbers in the House, you don't just pass bad laws and then push them to the people. I really want to thank the Court of Appeal for having found out that there was insufficient public participation and it was unconstitutional. And therefore now we've got to go back to 2022.
But what does that mean?
But then, is the government ready to go to that direction, since this was a decision that was made by the appellate court? Now, they only have one option, that maybe we expect them in the course of the day that they will lodge a complaint or file a submission for a hearing at the Supreme Court, requesting first the court to suspend the decision by the appellate court. Now, Ruto's problem with this ruling now, it tells us one thing, that the problem that Kenyans have been having with Ruto, or the problem or the challenge that Ruto himself has been having, is one, the problems are far from being addressed by the broad-based government that he intends to create. And of course, as a matter of fact, the ruling by the appellate court yesterday will have an improvement, rather, on the future finance acts that will be presented in this country. So in this analysis, I want us to look at what are the implications that, or what is the government staring at, or what is the interpretation of the decision to quash the Finance Act 2023 that the government depended on to pass the appropriations bills that would later become an act to enable its expenditure. Because now it finds itself in quite unprecedented place, especially on legality of the fiscal policies that are said to move this country forward. Number one, you know, the government now finds itself in a place where they have no legal way of raising funds for its physical operations, as we've said, because we all know that the Finance Bill 2024-2025 was as good as dead, because that was made dead. Immediately the House resumed. Those were some of the top priorities of the Parliament. The Finance Act 2023-2024 has been quashed by the courts. So here they find themselves in the Finance Act of 2022, 2021, 2022, the one that Uhuru Kenyatta used in his last administration. And they find themselves now in quite a bad corner because, you know, when the government was moving in, this government of Ruto, they had a manifesto, the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, abbreviated as BETA. Different from the manifesto that Uhuru had in his second term that gave precedence to the four economic pillars that they had, the four economic agendas that they had, that Ruto was crying, you know, the entry of Raila Odinga into the government of Uhuru Kenyatta saw a death to the four agendas that the government had. So this one is going to have a serious immediate implication that it will worsen the financial crisis that the country is in currently, unless the government moves to court seeking orders to suspend the ruling of the appellate court as they prepare a more challenging legal suit to see to it that they remain with the Finance Act of 2023. Currently, we all know that Kenya is in a financial mess, especially with the public debt, the debt management crisis, the huge public expenditure that the government is saying that they're cutting on expenditure, but then I don't feel that the necessary steps that they are taking are immediately addressing them. We know that they require time, yes, but then we need more radical budget cuts, or not necessarily budget cuts, but changes in the way that we spend the finances of this country in order to enable this country to have a sound financial position in regards to the management of the finance of this country. The second implication of this, you know, for quite a long time now, this government, especially the government of William Ruto and also the government of Uhuru Kenyatta to some point, had a high disregard for the law, especially in the manner in which the court pronounced itself on some of the specific rulings that the court gave. You remember at one point, the former or the emeritus CJ, that is David Maraga, advised the president by then Uhuru Kenyatta to dissolve parliament over the 2/3 general rule. And not just that alone. There were so many legal propositions or positions that the court gave that fell on deaf ears. Equally, the government of William Ruto has also found itself in quite similar territories. And that is why they are now finding it hard that courts are quashing some of these decisions. You see, a ruling, for example, with the housing levy. I'll explain to you the fate of the housing levy with the quash of the Finance Act of 2023 and the date of Finance Bill 2024. So they find themselves quite in unfamiliar territories in as far as the law is concerned. Because one thing that has been coming out clearly in this government is that there seems to be a dictatorship on issues that are affecting Kenyans. things that need good legal follow-ups or good public opinion inputs are just forced on Kenyan's throat in disregards of what the public is saying or what the public opinion is. So the problem that has been contributing majorly to this is that they've not been accommodating the public views on various issues that are of importance to the public. That is why every time they find themselves in court when people are challenging things that are supposed to push the government forward in implementing its manifesto or its development agenda. Still under this, the government has been forcing, of course, unpopular taxation regimes and levies. For instance, the housing levy. The housing levy, for a better part of it, Kenyans, a majority of them were not in for this. But then the government has seen to it that they must have that housing levy. By the way, now the implication of the housing levy itself is a different act in its entirety. Therefore, the housing levy will be continuing. That one will be continuing. Kenyans will still be cut on their salaries to contribute to the housing levy because it's in totality a different act. So in terms of legal matters, quashing of the Finance Act 2023, it was an act on its own. Then the housing bill, the Housing Levy Act was also an act on its own. So therefore, Kenyans are expected to be levied. For instance, another unpopular taxation regime or structure that the government has been having, for example, is the road maintenance levy. The road maintenance levy, majority of Kenyans have said that they are not in support of this. It's going to push the cost of transport high. It's going to push the cost of fuels high. It's going to push the cost of operating the business of public transport even high. But then the government has maintained that the introduction of a further 7 shillings, raising the levy to 25 shillings per litre of petroleum remains. So therefore, those are some of the challenges that also the incoming CS nominee of finance is quite going to find it hard in terms of things to do with implementation of the same. The other point still under this, there have been a record of draconian bills that have not been popular with the masses, but have been going through the legislative process and still seeing the light of the day, mainly because the government has not made it possible for Kenyans to see where the independence between the 3 arms of the government are. That is the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. That one has been quite impossible. The third implication or interpretation of this, the government might have serious implications, legal especially, going forwards with the quashing of the Finance Act 2023. But this might be costly, of course, to the government, but this can be mainly attributed to the fact that, when people are in power, they are kind of drunk with power and they think that everything starts and stops with them. And when now things get out of hand, when the true representatives whom they are representing with the power come demanding for their powers, that is when they now reach out to the people knowing that, this is our country, we need to talk, we don't need to give away our country to anarchists, and all sorts of things that have been said when citizens come out in their numbers to demand what is rightfully belongs to them. But let's rule out on the issue. I want just as, I saw some people saying that now we'll see a case where people will be moving to court seeking for tax refunds based on the taxation or the taxes that were cut from them with the Finance Act 2023. That one should be ruled out because in that ruling, within the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal made itself clear and refused to give an order on the prayers that the taxes be refunded, saying that legislative enactments enjoy presumptions of constitutionality up to the moment they are found to be unconstitutional. Therefore, no claims of refund can be instituted. That is according to the ruling that I've just read that was given by the Court of Appeal. The fourth implication of this is that there is a trend that is coming out here clearly that for the executive and the legislature, they need to acquaint themselves, or they need to familiarize themselves with the supreme law of the country, which is the Constitution of Kenya. That is the supreme law of land. Because we've been seeing embarrassing situations where a whole National Assembly with members of parliament who are overpaid in the first place. They're overpaid in terms of salaries, the allowances that they are given, you know, all that, mention it. So there is no need of overpaying these members of parliament when they retreat to make legislative agendas that should be important and critically good for this country. Then they are only making laws that are draconian and blunt. Laws that, when subjected to the lenses of the judiciary, are rendered illegal. And in the process, we spend money for their sitting allowances. We spend money for them purporting to be going around and collect public views. We spend money for them sitting and having retreats to write reports in expensive hotels. Name it, all that. You know, something, for instance, like a finance bill or a finance act, we blame both the executive and the judiciary, because the cabinet secretary in charge of treasury or finance is the person who comes mainly with some of these proposals that dictates the Kenyan's financial policy. Same as to the legislature, the chairpersonships of the members of the finance and budget policy committees, they equally make these laws. So when they retreat to make these laws that cannot see the light of the day when subjected to the lenses of the judiciary, then there is somewhere we are missing it as a country. That is something that has happened with the Finance Bill 2024-2025 that was quashed, that attracted huge protests within the country. It is something that is now happening with the Finance Act of 2023-2024. Even though we recognize the fact that the legislation process is a vicious process, but that one does not now give an excuse for them to be coming up with draconian laws or rules that seem to be unattainable in the long run. Another office that can be blamed on this is, of course, the office of the Attorney General. Up to what extent do they advise the government as the legal advisor to the government on particular issues that are critically important to the government, such as this, on the legality, and what will be the legal implication of them when they are subjected to the judiciary or where they are presented in court? Then, when such an important case is argued in court to the level of a court of appeal, then the government does not win on the same. There are still a lot of questions that can be asked on the office of the Attorney General as the chief legal advisor or defender of the government in court. That marks the end of our analysis. Thank you for watching.